Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 100th, the ceremonial celebration of the 100th year of city form of government. In 1914, the town of Revere went to its residents and asked if it would like to become a city, and it passed overwhelmingly. So on January 4th, 1915, marked the first organizational meeting of the Revere City Council. And with that, today we are going to celebrate by doing a reenactment of the inaugural exercises from 1915. I'd ask at this time that everyone please stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. And just following along with the program, I'd like to acknowledge today there are two former mayors that are present. We have current City Councilor at Large, Bob Hass. And our former mayor, Thomas Ambrosino. And today I'd like to acknowledge, I hope I got everyone as they walked in the door, but the former city councilors that are present today. We have Victor Finicos, former city clerk and city councilor John Henry, Eddie O'Hara, John Hurley, Fred Sinella, Kathy Penn, Mike Ferranti, Patrick Reardon, Brian Vesey, John Festa, Stephen Colarossi, Donald Goodwin, and Dougie Goodwin. And our mayor and former city councilor, Dan Rizzo. Also present, we have our school committee members today, Stacy Rizzo, Donna Wood Pruitt, Carol Ty, and Dan McGuire. And then we also have our former state representative, Kathy Ann Reinstein, present. And participating in today's reenactment exercises are Representative Rosalie Vincent. And then Tony Conti has just walked in, former city councilor. And with that, I'm going to call up our Director of Veterans Affairs, Nick Bua, to please read the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. Thank you.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man now alive. Who remembers that famous day and year? He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the old North Church tower as a signal light. One if by land, two if by sea. And I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm. For the country folk to be up in arm, then he said good night, and with a muffled oar, silently rowed to the Charlestown shore. Just as the moon rose over the bay, with swinging wide at his mooring lay, the Somerset British man of war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friends through alley and street, wanderers and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers, marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed the tower of the old knot church by the wooden stairs with stealth tread to the belfry chamber overhead, and started the pigeons from their perch on the somber rafters that round them made masses in moved shapes of shade, by the trembling ladder steep and tall to the highest window in the wall. When he paused to listen and look down, a moment on roofs of the town, and the moonlight flowed all over all. Beneath, in the churchyard, lay the dead in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel tread, the watchful night wind as it went, creeping along from the tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, all is well. A moment only he feels the spell of the place and hour in the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on the shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to the mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side. Now he gazed at the landscape far and near. Then, impetuous, stamped the earth and turned to tighten his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old knot church, as it rose above the graves of the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And lo, he looks on the belfry heights, a glimmer, then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes, till full on his side a second lamp in the belfry burns. A hurry of hoofs in the village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath, from the pebbles, is passing a spark. Struck out by the steed flying fearless and fleet, that was all. And yet, through the gloom and the light, the fate of the nation was riding that night. And the spark struck out by the steed in his flight, kindled the land in flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep. And beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic meeting the ocean tides. And under the alders that skirts its edge, now soft in the sand, now loud on the ledge, it heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowed of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and he felt damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed in the meeting house windows, black and bare, gazed at him with a spectral glare. As they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon, it was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadow brown, and one was safe and asleep in his bed. Who at the bridge would be first to fall? Who that day would be laying dead, pierced by the British musket ball? Yet know the rest in the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them the ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall. Chasing the redcoats down the lane, they crossed the field to emerge again under the trees as the turn of the road, and the only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went the cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice of darkness, a knock on the door, and the word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hours of darkness and peril and need, the people will awaken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of their steed. In the midnight message of Paul Revere.
Thank you, Nick. I would be very amiss not to mention the presence of our Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Bob DeLeo. And I believe I saw Dr. Paul Dakin walk in as well, our Superintendent of Public Schools. And at this time, I'd like to call upon our Representative Rosalie Vincent to share with us the Sword of Bunker Hill. This is normally sung and played with some music, but Rosalie?
This is quite a challenge. Thank you. He lay upon his dying bed, his eyes were growing dim, when with a feeble voice he called his weeping son to him. Weep not, my boy, the veteran said, I bow to heaven's will. But quickly from yon antlers bring the sword of Bunker Hill. Quickly from yon antlers bring the sword of Bunker Hill. The sword was brought, the soldier's eye lit with a sudden flame, and as he grasped the ancient blade, he murmured Warren's name. Then said, my boy, I leave you gold, but what is richer still? I leave you, mark me now, the sword of Bunker Hill. I leave you, mark me now, the sword of Bunker Hill. 'Twas on that dread immortal day I dared the Briton's hand. A captain raised his blade on me, I tore it from his hand. And while the glorious battle raged, it lighted freedom's will. For son, the God of freedom blessed the sword of Bunker Hill. Yes, son, the God of freedom blessed the sword of Bunker Hill. Oh, keep the sword, his accents broke, a smile and he was dead. His wrinkled hand still grasped the blade upon his dying bed. The sun is gone, the sword remains, its glory growing still. And 80 millions bless the sire, the sword of Bunker Hill. And 80 millions bless the sire, the sword of Bunker Hill.
Thank you, Representative Vincent. I decided to read the following passage from the essay entitled A Brief History of the City of Revere, by Theodore W. Gillette to provide the public with an answer to the age-old question of how exactly the name Revere was chosen for the wonderful community that we call home. The essay in full was read during the 1915 inaugural exercises, but I just chose this excerpt. But the name of North Chelsea did not long satisfy the citizens. In 1870, there began an agitation for the adoption of another name. There was a club of young men known as the Putnam Associates, occupying rooms in a building on Pleasant Street, which most of us remember as a police station. There, the agitation took shape, and public meetings were called to discuss the subject. There was no record of action in a town meeting by the appointment of a committee or presentation of reports. It is well remembered, however, that such meetings were held and that many new names were suggested for the town. There were probably informal meetings called by general invitation. Apparently, no one opposed the idea. The only question was as to the name to be adopted. The name Revere is said to have been suggested by William G. Harris. There was no local connection with the name of the great patriot that made it especially appropriate. The descendants of Revere continued to operate a copper smelting plant at Point Shirley long after his death, but it is not recalled that this fact had any bearing. The advocates of the name Revere probably had no other reason than to do his memory honor. Eventually, a meeting was held in Town Hall at which the citizens were invited to attend and a ballot for choice of a name. There is no record of this meeting, but it was probably held in January or February of 1871, and the patriotic citizens prevailed. The name Revere received a plurality of votes, and we know that all controversy was dropped, as a petition was sent to the legislature asking for the enactment of the necessary authority, which was signed by 95 citizens. This was filed in the House of Representatives February 16, 1871. The act was passed March 24, 1871, with a proviso that it must be accepted within 90 days. The selectmen must have acted that same day they received the news, for a town meeting was held on April 3rd, and the act was accepted by a vote of 88-7. The vote was received with cheers. The voting was in the afternoon, and at 4 o'clock, church and school bells were rung, flags displayed, and a salute fired in honor of the change. Houses and stores were illuminated in the evening. A grand celebration of the event was held exactly 15 days later, that being the anniversary of Paul Revere's famous ride. In the evening, there was a program in the hall. Andrew Burnham was chairman. There was present by invitation a lineal descendant of Paul Revere who spoke briefly. I am unable to describe him other than, as appears in the report, that his name was Mr. Curtis. Surely a remarkable foreshadowing of this day, on which we place at the head of the new city of Revere a mayor of the same name. In the celebration of the adoption of the name of Revere in 1871, the dedication of this building in 1900, and today's inauguration of the city government, we find a triple coincidence. In each of these celebrations, there has been tribute paid to the memory of Paul Revere, a reading of Longfellow's immortal poem. To use again the words of our fellow citizen, Mr. L.K. Washburn, the name Revere honors us. Let us do nothing to dishonor the name. Let us take pride in our city and make it worthy of the great patriot for whom it is named, and worthy of the glorious state and nation of which it is a part. Thank you for your attention, and I will now call upon Mr. Bob Upton to read an historical article prepared by our historical commissioner, Mr. Jeff Perlman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity to participate in this celebration and recognition this evening. And Mr. Perlman asked me to read from the article that he has prepared. I'm going to read some of that article, but I'm also going to read a little bit from the excerpts from Mayor Curtis's remarks. As we celebrate our centennial, come journey with me back to 1915. It was in that year that we were incorporated as a city, and we inaugurated our first mayor. On January 4th, 1915, Arthur Benton Curtis was sworn into office as Revere's first chief executive. It was a most impressive ceremony, and the day and evening were spent in appropriate exercises and rejoicing. The inaugural exercises took place at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon at City Hall building. In the evening was given over to a grand ball and banquet, which did not terminate until 2 in the morning. The Revere Journal stated that never has the Revere City Hall held a larger gathering at 2:30 on a Monday afternoon when the official exercises began. Every seat in the commodious building was occupied. The balcony was crowded and practically all the standing room was taken. The program was carried throughout without change, and the features were of patriotic and highly interesting nature. Regarding the ceremony, a few minutes after 2, the city officials elected entered upon the stage. City Clerk Albert J. Brown presided, introduced the speakers, and spoke briefly himself. Afternoon exercises were opened by the Reverend Nelson S. Burbank. There were several selections by the Schubert Male Quartet that were loudly applauded by the audience. The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere was splendidly recited by George Arthur Sackett. This poem had been recited previously in 1871 when Revere became a town, and again in 1899 to dedicate the new town hall. Following the recitation of the poem, Miss Anna George, a Beechmont schoolteacher, sang The Sword of Bunker Hill, accompanied on the piano by Arthur H. Curtis. A few remarks by Mayor Curtis. Gentlemen of the Council, we meet today at the threshold of a new and untried municipal existence. After nearly 3/4 of a century living under the town form of government, the qualified voters decided by practically a 2/3 vote to do away with the old and take on the garments of a larger growth. With a population of nearly 25,000 and rapidly increasing, the old ways of doing things seemed cumbersome, ineffective to accomplish the greatest progress and happiness of the people. Concerning the subject of taxation, Mayor Curtis continued, let no man think because he is only assessed a poll tax that it ends the amount of taxes he is called upon to pay. You may not see it in black and white, but it is levied upon you just as surely as you can receive the landlord's bill for rental. Our tax rate of $23.60 is much too high, and yet with the great increasing demands upon us by the Commonwealth, the burden of town debt, the high interest charges, the schools, the incessant calls for improvements in all directions, many of them necessary, renders the question of reducing the tax rate not an absolute certainty. After the reading of the address, the audience rose and joined in the singing of America, and the official program was brought to a close by the giving of the benediction by the Reverend Father James Lee, pastor of the Immaculate Conception. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Jeff, if you're tuning in. Probably not. I'd like to acknowledge Senator Petroselli, who just walked in. And right now I'd like to call upon Mayor Dan Rizzo to share with us an excerpt from the 1915 inaugural address of Arthur B. Curtis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, and you did a tremendous job, by the way, in putting this together, so thank you very much for your hard work. And before I read this excerpt, I just wanted to recognize our Revere Police Honor Guard, who you see over here to my left. They were founded shortly after Chief Caffarelli took office with the vision of manning a ceremonial unit that is above equal in both dress and ceremony. The unit is headed by Sergeant Joe Cavino and has a current enrollment of 15 members with a waiting list. While the main focus is on memorial services, the unit performs at schools and other public venues during Flag Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and other various civic and political functions throughout the year. Tonight, the Honor Guard is revealing for the first time their new uniforms, blending the black tunic and original badges, which they had specially made, replicating the first ones worn by Revere police officers over 100 years ago. The thin blue line honors the memory of all officers worldwide, while the thick blue line on the trousers represent the long line of officers that have gone before us, as well as those that will follow them. Finally, their service hat has a braided black band encircling it that represents and honors fallen Revere police officers of the past. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Appreciate it. And now an excerpt from Mayor Arthur B. Curtis in his 1915 inaugural address. Gentlemen of the Council, we meet today at the threshold of a new and untried municipal existence. After nearly three-fourths of a century of living under the town form of government, the qualified voters decided by practically a two-thirds vote to do away with the old and take on the garments of a larger growth. With a population of nearly 25,000 and rapidly increasing, the old ways of doing things seem cumbersome and ineffective to accomplish greatest progress and happiness of the people. For nearly 300 years, the New England form of town government has been deeply rooted in the communities of our beloved country. It had its origins in the home. It found expression in the compact drawn up in the cabin of the Mayflower on that bleak day in November 1620. And its influence has extended not only to the boundaries of our own domains, but wherever men and women of New England birth or ancestry have made their abode. Such a form of government founded upon religion and a deep and abiding faith in God and man must be from the very nature of things a blessing to mankind. In its town meetings, every citizen holding the precious right of suffrage can by voice and vote assist in making effective any measure dear to him or the community. Each voter is an alderman or councilman who needs no election to make his rights secure. All this we have changed, losing much it's true, but upon the whole being gainers along the line of better business methods and true progress in civic affairs.
Thank you. And at this time, I will now like to announce the unveiling of the commemorative city plaques. If you would be so kind to please turn your attention to the rear of the council chamber. On the upper chair rail, there permanently affixed are 58 plaques indicating the names and years of all the city councilors who have represented the citizens of Revere since 1915 through today's current city council, which seats before us. A new plaque will be installed come January 2016 and for all future city councils for years to come. In conclusion, I would like to thank you all for attending this significant milestone in the history of the city of Revere by recognizing 100 years of the city form of government. I would like to thank Mayor Rizzo and Representative Vincent for participating in the ceremony. A special thank you goes out to the members of the Centennial Committee and the Historical Commission members for working to put this ceremony together, specifically Nick Bua, John Henry, Rose Napolitano, Jeff Perlman, Diane Santoro, Phyllis Spagnolo, and Bob Upton. Right now you are invited. Thank you. You're all invited to stay for a small collation of pastry and coffee on the main floor of City Hall outside of Mayor Rizzo's office. And following at 6 p.m., the City Council will proceed with their organizational meeting for election of president and vice president. And following that, Mayor Rizzo will be delivering his State of the City address. Thank you all for attending.